I didn't have much of a plan going into this project. All I knew is I wanted to make a nice cutting board, and I wanted it to have a wow factor. To me, planning is an essential part of anything you do. From building a house to going on a trip, planning is a necessity. For example, when you build a house, there's a lot that goes into actually building the house, and a lot that goes into building a house before you actually get to build a house. Let me explain. Before you can even break ground on a piece of property you're wanting to build a house on, you have to get permits. You have to get power ran out there. You have to have people lined up to do everything for you when the time comes for you to actually break ground. And then once you break ground, you have to pour the foundation. Then you have to start framing. There's a lot that goes into building a house. If you don't plan for those people to come and do their part of the build, then that build will get dragged on for a long time. The same thing when it comes to going on a trip. You have to plan for a trip. You have to plan where you're staying. You have to plan what you're going to eat. And then a lot of people plan what they're wearing. Personally, I don't. I get all my clothes, throw them in a bag, and I say we'll figure it out when we get there. But I get it, that's not for everybody. In my opinion, effective planning leads to success. And I think I would have avoided a lot of mistakes if I had have done some more planning before I tackled this build. So this project taught me that when I do another project in the future, to plan a little bit. It doesn't take a lot more time, but it'll help you in the long run with your project. From a very early age, I can remember YouTube has been a big part of my life. And I've noticed the older that I've gotten, the more my taste for what type of YouTube videos has changed. What I liked when I was 12 is not what I enjoy watching now that I'm 19. What I enjoyed when I was 12 was probably something like somebody playing a video game or a Dude Perfect video. Now don't get me wrong, I still love and enjoy Dude Perfect videos. Now I enjoy watching woodworking videos or pretty much any sort of DIY project build. I could sit there for hours and watch these videos. The reason I love these videos so much is just because of how mesmerizing they are, not just because of the project that they're working on and the build, but because of the storytelling. And storytelling is such a big part of any video. I am a podcast connoisseur, and the reason I love podcasts so much is because, one, I can be doing two things at once, so I can be working and listening to the podcast at the same time. But also the main thing is the storytelling. I hear amazing stories every single day on each podcast I listen to of people's resilience and also just their determination to keep going each and every day, and just amazing testimonies and flat out bizarre tales. Really anything and everything. And storytelling is just so incredible to me. And that's what I really hope to capture in these videos moving forward. I want to make more videos like this and tell stories that people want to hear, that are enjoyable from my own experiences in life up to this point. And I think YouTube is a great place for people to do that, to share their stories with other people who have the same common interests as them. And so I hope you find value in these videos that I do, and that you enjoy the sort of videos I create, because I love doing this. I love figuring it all out and getting better each and every day at producing a great, informative, fun, entertaining video. Okay, so I ran into a little bit of a problem here with the cutting board that I spent probably 8 hours working on. I should just show you the problem. Right here, you can see there's massive crack on it. There's another crack there. There's some down there. They're just all around. And originally, I thought I could just fill them with epoxy and call it good. But then they started cracking more. And I realized that the reason it was cracking was not due to I was tightening one side of the clamp tighter than the other. Turns out that this wood is not as dry as I anticipated. So it's drying out right now, and as it dries out, it's beginning to crack, it's beginning to shrink, and that's what's causing all the cracking. So, yeah. This is now firewood. My dad suggested that I let it dry out, and then maybe I can cut it to a smaller size, make a smaller cutting board out of it, so that's what I'll probably do. But, yeah, this is firewood. Oh, but I got some more wood, so we're fixing to build a new cutting board. All this lumber is kiln dried. I got maple, and I've got some walnut. And it may look like a lot of lumber, but that's because I'm making 3 different cutting boards. I got a lot of people to give stuff to for Christmas. Let's just say that. So let's get to working on that. So if you do find value in this video, or if you think it's just too long, subscribe then too. And that way I know to shorten my videos, and also that you probably liked it, at least a majority of it. And also drop a comment if you have any questions for me or any advice to offer me. Or, I know a lot of people just like to be mean. I'll read those too. And to be honest, if I don't like it or if it's mean, I'll just delete it. The species of wood I used for the first cutting board I built was some southern red oak. We milled this red oak on our sawmill about 5 or 6 months ago for another project my dad had going. And, you know, my thinking was, hey, we had this fairly dry red oak up here in the loft of our barn. Let me just use some of this, save me a little money, and make a beautiful cutting board out of this. And clearly, that thinking came back to bite me. When I purchased the wood for the second cutting board, so all the maple and the walnut, I talked to the guy at the wood yard and kind of walked him through the problem I had with my first cutting board. And he's like, well, what did you use? I said, some red oak we milled up on our sawmill. He's like, where'd you get it from? I said, to tell you the truth, I really don't know. It was some log we had laying around. He's like, well, it was probably a southern red oak. And I was like, well, why does that matter? Why is it cracking? He said, well, it's probably one of two things or both. He told me it could be the moisture content was too high, which it probably was, and I should have checked it beforehand. That was a big mistake. And two, he said southern oak in general, not just southern red oak, but southern oak is very prone to cracking over its lifetime. He said, here we don't stock any southern oak at all of any sort because it does crack. It is so prone to cracking. And I said, well, where do you get all the oak you do stock from? He said, we get all our oak from North Carolina or farther north. He said, nothing south of North Carolina do we get any oak from. He said, because it just cracks so much. And I said, well, why does it crack? Why do you think it cracks? He said, my best guess at that is because in these southern states such as Georgia and Florida, the humidity is so high. And so he thinks that that plays a huge role in the cracking of a tree once it begins to dry out. So, for future builds, I made my mind up. If it's any furniture or any nice piece of any sort, I will not be using any southern oak of any kind. I don't even know the brand. I made this little jig and laid each section of wood out in this type of brick orientation so that each joint would be staggered. And I think it turned out pretty good in the end. All the tools I've used in this video aren't the nicest tools money can buy. They're not something you would find in a professional shop, but for me, with these builds, they get the job done. Another thing is that they're completely free. They're my dad's tools, and he's been gracious enough to let me use them. And for that, I'm truly grateful because none of these projects would be possible without it. In my personal opinion, I don't believe the tool is always what makes the build turn out well. I think it matters to a degree because you wouldn't want to use the wrong tool for the wrong job. But also, a project such as this, I believe, takes a level of knowledge and a level of craftsmanship for it to turn out the way you're wanting it to. And when it comes to buying tools, there's always a cheaper alternative. For example, the miter saw we used in this video. It is a miter saw from Harbor Freight. And say what you will about Harbor Freight, but most of the tools I bought from there have been very great tools and served me well. See how this turns out. Here it is after we glued it up. I'm gonna go put it in the basement where the temperature is a little bit warmer. I think that might help with the drying process. Okay, so I just finished getting my router sled set up to flatten this. I just kept it glued down with some hot glue there, so it should keep it in place. But I already set my depth and everything. I'll just run this along the top to flatten it. It should work pretty well, but we'll see. So I forgot to film all this last night. My camera died and I didn't realize it. But what I did, I got it all flattened and I sanded it with a 40 grit. The reason I sanded it with a 40 grit was because when you sand with the 80 and stuff, it seemed to be kind of more burning the wood because this end grain's a lot harder to sand. So I sand it with 40 grit, and I'll work up in the grits, doing a water pop in between. And yeah, I just cut it to size, so 16.5 inches, and ripped it down on the table saw. I really wish these were the same width, but the way I glued it, I put a little too much tension on certain spots, and so it kind of bowed it a little bit. But yeah, it's 16.5 inches long by, I don't remember the width. I don't have a tape measure, but there's an update on the cutting board. In the case of this miter saw, the same miter saw, the DeWalt one, comparable to this one, is about a $500 saw. This one was in the $200 to $250 range just for the saw. And it has been a great saw, cuts perfect 45-degree angles, it works phenomenally. And you saved a lot of money. Now, the DeWalt one I have never used, so I don't know if it's any better, any worse. But that's an example of a cheaper alternative to a tool. I love nice tools like the next guy. I mean, I have all Milwaukee tools for my business, and when I buy one of their tools, I make sure it's one of their fuel tools because those are better, they're brushless, they're going to last longer. When it comes to a tool that you're only going to use once or twice a year, I don't think it's worth the investment in that tool. An example of that is a domino. You could spend $1,200 or however much it is for a nice Festool domino. But Craig Jig makes a jig for your drill that does the same exact thing for a fraction of the cost. And for me, I'm only going to use a domino 2 to 3 times a year. Why not just invest in the Craig Jig domino jig? Seems like a no-brainer to me. Throughout the duration of this project, I ended up wasting a lot of glue on the various cutting boards I built. The mistake I made was I glued both sides of a block. So when you put 2 blocks together, I wasn't just gluing one side of that block, I was gluing both and sticking them together. Now, I always thought that more glue means better hold strength. I posted a short on the same channel asking, hey, am I doing this wrong? Should I just glue one side or should I glue both? And the responses I got were that I should glue just one side. One, it saves you on a lot of glue, and two, you get more strength because that glued side has another side, that wood side, to bond to. Luckily, we had a full gallon of this Titebond 3 glue, so I didn't run out, but still, this project taught me a ton about gluing, and moving forward, I won't use as much glue, and I'll only glue one side. Buying and learning how to use a CNC is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. My one problem with the CNC is this: does owning and utilizing a CNC machine diminish your title as a woodworker? Do you become less of a craftsman because you automate your workflow? Or are you just working smarter instead of harder? One of my favorite guys I watch on YouTube is a guy by the name of Johnny Builds. This guy, he's made some stunning pieces throughout the years. Everything from a Star Wars themed table to a table out of literal paper. This dude has done a lot. But there's one common aspect I've noticed in a majority of his videos. He uses his CNC machine for pretty much everything. So what do y'all think? Is Johnny a well-rounded woodworker? Or does he just put it all on a CNC machine? I'm curious to know your opinion. I know for me, my opinion is that I think a CNC is amazing and that you are a better woodworker because you're utilizing your resources. From my research, I've found that a CNC machine, learning the coding and the software is not a walk in the park. And in Johnny's case, he knows how to operate it very well. And he's put in the work and he's learned the program to run his CNC machine. And so, in that way, I think he is a fantastic woodworker. And he's been able to make cuts and create stuff that would be nearly impossible or take way longer if he didn't have a CNC machine. So Johnny, if you're watching this video, keep it up, man. I love what you're creating. I cut out a lot of the sanding because who wants to watch me sand for 2-3 minutes? But I did water pop between the grits, and that ensured that I would have a lot smoother surface in the end. Flexibility is something that I've had to learn over the years. And being homeschooled was a great teacher of this flexibility. For example, there were times when my grandfather would call, who lives next door, and say, hey, I need the boys for a couple hours with this or that project. And so we would have to put down our school and run over to help him because there was nobody else available at the time to help him with what he needed. Another example is we would have to run errands a lot. If we ran errands, we would have to take our school in the car with us or do it when we got back. Again, learning to be flexible. And this build really reminded me of the importance of flexibility. This cutting board did not go the way I planned it at all. And as you saw, I had to switch things up mid-build. But this project, just like in life, doesn't always go the way you plan. You hit speed bumps that can slow progress, or you hit a wall that can send you flying 3 steps back. But that's just a part of life, and you gotta learn to roll with the punches. But sometimes those speed bumps slow you down to prepare you for something better further down the road. For the finish, I use something called Odie's oil. It's a natural oil-based finish that I've used on a couple other projects. I found it on Amazon. I really like it. It smells great. It's food safe. And I applied 2 coats to the cutting board, and I gave each coat about 24 hours to dry. And after the first coat, I sanded it lightly with a maroon pad just to kind of scuff up the surface so the next coat would stick a little bit better. And then the final thing I did before I put the feet on was I put a cut board wax on it. And that took me 20 minutes. You just buff it on, let it dry a little bit, and buff it right off. And it's as smooth as butter. The feet I used for this cutting board were just some cheap ones I found on Amazon. I mean, I bought an 18 pack for about $8, and they seem to be durable, easy to install. And with that, this project's finished. I'm really happy with how the cutting board turned out. Yes, there are some things that I may have done differently, and it does have its flaws. But each project I do is a learning experience, and I learned a lot in this project that I can apply and get better on the next one. Let me know if you like how this cutting board turned out. Is it something that you would put in your own house? Oh yeah, and I also built this jewelry box for my girlfriend for Christmas.